So let's take a look at my top 5 list, the 5 best movies by the great Monty Python alum, Terry Gilliam, coming up next. I really appreciate Gilliam and his body of work. He's one of my favorite directors. I like his style. I like the wacky expressionism, the crazy ideas, the crazy shots in his movies. Now first, before I get going, what are your top 5 Gilliam movies? Which Gilliam movies do you like? Why don't you leave me a comment first and then see what I have to say about his body of work. And remember, this list is only for fun. Number 5 on my list is a classic, probably the most well-known of all Gilliam's movies, the most beloved, I think, by a wide range of people. It's his early 1980s classic, Brazil.
What were we saying?
Rare.
Oh, right. I saw the most wonderful idea for Christmas presents at the chemist. Gift tokens. Medical gift tokens. Oh, that sounds warm.
Brazil is a futuristic science fiction movie. You know, Gilliam likes to work in the science fiction medium, about a low-level bureaucrat who is working for a gigantic English bureaucracy. And this movie's depiction of bureaucracy is absolutely amazing and striking, probably the best thing about it. Main character is played by Jonathan Pryce, who would collaborate with Gilliam over the years in several movies. He's outstanding in this movie. You also see Ian Holm as another bureaucrat, another collaborator with Gilliam. And the Jonathan Pryce character has wild fantasies, dreams of a better world, and the movie contrasts his dreams with the reality of life on the ground in early 1980s England. In the movie, one of the heroes, I love this, is an American played by Robert De Niro, an underground plumber who comes and helps out the Jonathan Pryce character fix up his apartment, because you know what? The Pryce character can't get any help with his apartment because of all the regulations in society. And so we hit one of Gilliam's favorite themes, which is humdrum life, being bogged down in a deep, dark system. In this case, it's bureaucracy. And then the opposite is striving to be free, whether it's in dreams and visions, or whether it's in some kind of entrepreneurial spirit, here depicted by Harry Tuttle, played by Robert De Niro. So you're going to see this, I think, in just about all of Gilliam's movies, the conflict between dreams and reality. Number 4 is a spirited example of a remake of a book, but also a wild re-envisioning of it. And I've read Don Quixote a number of times, and I find that Terry Gilliam's The Man Who Killed Don Quixote is an amazingly wonderful movie.
Sancho.
No.
Sancho. You've come back! You've come back to save me! Oh, you tricky peasant! Oh.
Movie stars Adam Driver as a director who goes back to Spain after having already directed a movie in his days as a college student, now directing a big budget movie. Movie contrasts the big budget movie experience with this sort of small art house auteur work that the Driver character created. And he happens to run into one of the former actors in his old college movie, a man played here by Jonathan Pryce again, who believes he's Don Quixote. And this character who believes he's Don Quixote thinks Adam Driver is Sancho Panza. Well, the director is in despair. He doesn't like the Hollywood big budget movie scene, and he finds himself trapped on a journey with a madman. A man who thinks he's Don Quixote, but also a man who is doing exactly what Don Quixote does in the novel. Wonderful recreation of the novel or scenes from the novel. A novel which everybody in the world ought to read and study. I believe it's one of the best books ever written in the entire history of the world. And I love that Gilliam loves Don Quixote. It's in the spirit of his work. You know, he tried to create a movie with Johnny Depp in the 1990s. There was a documentary made out of this as a failure to make his Don Quixote movie. But he was finally able to make it in the last 2 or 3 years. And he did it so well. I love this movie a lot. And I'm telling you, Gilliam has done his best work, or at least some of his best work, in his 70s, in his late 70s. That's really inspiring to me. If you keep the creative vision alive, if you stay a little crazy, you might do the kinds of great work later in your old age, as Terry Gilliam has done. And that's partly what Don Quixote is about. A madman in his 50s going off and doing his best, most interesting work. My number 3 choice from Gilliam is also about madmen. It's a running theme with Gilliam, madness versus sanity. And madness being necessary to survive, produce visions, produce great art. And this movie is 12 Monkeys.
Drugs! What'd they give you? Dorsey? Haldol? How much? How much?
Learn your drugs, know your doses. It's elementary.
I need to make a telephone call.
Telephone call. A telephone call. That's communication with the outside world. Doctor's discretion. Nah. Hey, if all of these nuts could just make phone calls, it could spread. Insanity oozing through telephone cables, oozing to the ears of all these poor, sane people, infecting them. Wackos everywhere, plague of madness.
Now, like The Man Who Killed Don Quixote, this is a remake, but it's a remake of an actual movie. Of the short classic La Jetée. It's a story of a man here played by Bruce Willis who's in a future society. And it's a highly bureaucratic, rigorous, totalitarian society. It sends him back as a prisoner and as a human experiment into the past. This future world has suffered from a terrible pandemic outbreak where most humans have not survived and the survivors have been driven underground. So the scientist technocracy sends the Bruce Willis character back in time to the 1990s to figure out when the pandemic started so they can stop it and alter the future. So yeah, this is a time travel story. But the Bruce Willis character is disoriented, he's a prisoner, and he gets sent back to a madhouse, a lunatic asylum in Philadelphia in the 1990s. And he meets a character played by Brad Pitt, wonderful acting job here early in Pitt's career. And this character seems to be the one who has started the pandemic. So the scientists in the future start to investigate this Brad Pitt character using the Bruce Willis character as a pawn. And here you see some of the similar themes we've talked about, like in Brazil, a gigantic bureaucracy using a single ordinary man, abusing him, making him its prisoner. It's a system that doesn't work very well and is very strict and rigorous. Versus the lunatics in this movie, and Bruce Willis has to join up with them. Now, if you've seen La Jetée, the old French movie, you'll know what happens at the end of 12 Monkeys. But I find this movie particularly touching. It uses a lot of film history, including Alfred Hitchcock's Vertigo. And again, Gilliam is working in the science fictional medium. He loves science fiction and fantasy because to express the ideas, the differences between sanity and insanity, and why insanity actually might be a reasonable position in the modern world, I think fantasy and science fiction work pretty well for Gilliam. Now, my number 2 on this list will be Strange. But that's fitting because Gilliam is strange. I think almost nobody watched this movie, and I must be the lone critic in the universe who loves this movie and thinks it's great. It's the Zero Theorem.
Cohen left. Oncological Research Division. Requesting a disability leave.
Or reassignment to work at home.
That's management's decision, Mr. Left. We only deal with health issues here. What seemed to be the problem?
We are dying.
Who's we?
This is an early 2010s movie about a character who seems to have multiple personality disorder, or he just uses the word we instead of I to describe himself. He's a character who has bought an old church and lives in it. Again, this is a science fiction movie. It takes place in a futuristic society that at once seems fantastic and amazing, but also feels restricted and totalitarian in its own way. It's sort of a Brave New World atmosphere in the Zero Theorem in that there are too many pleasures pandering to people's base emotions. And so this character escaping to a cathedral, first to live and then to work, because this movie is in part about what working from home is like. This character is named after the writer of the gloomy book of the Bible, Ecclesiastes, Quohen Leth, and he is seeking to find his calling in life. No, literally, he's trying to get a phone call from somebody who's going to tell him how to live and what his identity is. So he wants to work from home in part because his job environment is cruel and harsh and annoying and filled with noise, but in part because he wants to wait on that phone call. He's received one early in his life, but he didn't take the call. He wants a phone call from the somebody or something that's going to tell him what life is all about. This movie is dark and disturbing in a lot of ways. It has one of the best movie houses, I think, in movie history. That's one reason, if not the only reason, to watch this movie. Wonderful acting here. Lucas Hedges is in this movie. He's great. I find this movie to be dark, haunting, and religious. It's about belief. It's about getting out of reality, escaping it, or can you escape it? And that's one of Gilliam's major themes. You'll see it in 12 Monkeys. You'll see it in this movie. Can we ever escape the boxes and the constrictions and the jails that are our lives? It's symbolized in both of these movies by the fantasy island. The idea that both characters, the Bruce Willis in 12 Monkeys and Quohen Leth in the Zero Theorem, might be able to escape. And in the Zero Theorem, the island is in a computer. It's a simulated reality. It's not a real place. Now, before I get to number 1, my vast apologies to Gilliam's other work. Time Bandits, The Brothers Grimm, The Adventures of Baron Munchausen, The Fisher King, The Imaginarium of Dr. Parnassus, and several more. You might like some of these movies. I like some of them, I don't like others, but I find them all kind of fascinating, at least in certain stretches. So what's my number one? It's probably the most famous of all Gilliam's movies, co-directed with Monty Python alum Terry Jones. It's Monty Python and the Holy Grail.
I'm your king.
Well, I didn't vote for you.
You don't vote for kings.
Well, how'd you become king then?
The Lady of the Lake, her arm clad in the purest shimmering samite, held aloft Excalibur from the bosom of the water, signifying by divine providence that I, Arthur, was to carry Excalibur. That is why I'm your king.
Listen, strange women lying in ponds distributing swords is no basis for a system of government.
One reason to put this at number one, people are still watching this movie, rewatching it, young people are doing so, and they're quoting it regularly. This movie is a postmodern extravaganza of storytelling, but telling a story about a story. It's got the Monty Python anarchic comedic spirit, it makes fun of history, and yet informs us about history. It's an all-out fun movie to watch, and I think the quality of the first 4 scenes alone puts it in that sort of upper echelon of Gilliam movies, heck, maybe all comedy movies made in the last 50 years. So what do you think of my list? Which of these movies should not be in a Gilliam top 5 list? Please let me know. And before I go, I recommend Gilliam's wacky autobiography. It's got a cool cover, you can display it in your room like I do, and enjoy it. Please subscribe to this channel for more great movie content. Thanks for watching, have a great day.
And so Arthur and Bedivere and Sir Robin set out on their search to find the enchanter of whom the old man had spoken in scene 24.